Greetings and salutations to you beautiful people out there over the internet. It's another Wednesday, so it's not playing politics. I am, as always, Alexander Keaton, and with me is my ever-present and loyal Rio, Nick Bradshaw. Nick, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, buddy?
I can't complain.
I mean, there is evidence to suggest that you can.
That's probably true. That's probably true. Although, I'll admit, you know, I'm also not a pipe fitter working on the Exxon or on the XL pipeline.
I mean, technically, 11,000 other people aren't either anymore.
Exactly. So I would imagine they probably have a little bit more reason to complain than I do.
Yeah, just a bit.
And that's what we in the business call a transition, folks.
Nice segue there.
Thank you. Yeah. No, but I mean, in all seriousness, I mean it's a tragic thing because again, it's not just the 11,000 direct jobs that have been lost. Some people are estimating this is over 30 or 40,000 jobs because of all the other associated industries.
Well, not to mention the big. I mean, you want to talk about really leaning into something. One of the things about the Keystone was that, a lot of that work with regard to the drilling or fracking or generation was a lot on the Canadian side, but there was a lot of transport on the U.S. side. But, it's designed to operate when efficiently operating. It's designed to produce a net neutral footprint, as I understand it. Mm-hmm. So you've now done away with that platform. And now you've got transportation that's required because it's not like we're free from fossil fuel. So you still need transportation. So now you're going to put it into trucks and trains and transportation as such. I don't know of a lot of net neutral trains and net neutral trucks to transport this now. So your overall footprint is bigger and you've put a lot of people out of work. And all you've done is what is the end objective? The symbolic gesture of appeasing your base?
I
mean, Biden came in as I'm the union guy, right? Again, this is not our show. We never want to take the direction for we're going to bash and we're going to be like every show and just this is why everyone is so dumb and we figured it. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just saying.
Yeah, this can't be meat puppet bad the channel.
Right. But I'm saying he came in as I'm going to be the most pro-union president ever, and in one of his first actions, it's just, I mean. If I'm a union worker right now, I'm really starting to think about the title of our show tonight. I'm starting to think about buyer's remorse. I mean, this was supposed to be this return to normalcy. And I sure hope unemployment isn't the return to normalcy. The other thing that terrified me was when I heard the phrase, everybody deserves a house. I'm all about people having opportunities to live safely and to be provided with an opportunity for shelter and security. But I think we got into trouble the last time because of these policies about everyone should have the right to own a home. Owning a home is not only a choice, it's a gigantic financial burden. You've got to be capable of doing it. You don't want to set people up to fail.
Okay, so before we go too far afield, because I think there's an interconnection here. You start off with the question of why would he do this if he's supposed to be pro-union, right? The question, and this I think kind of ties into this point about the housing, right? Everyone has the right to buy a house. Like that should be a right, but that doesn't mean that you have the ability to buy something, right? There's a big difference there. The problem is, I think in both, without getting conspiratorial or even overly cynical, I don't know that Biden believes in global warming and all of this. I just don't. But I do think that he thinks legitimately, well, or let's be honest, whoever's running his administration probably does think that this green energy thing that they can make. I think they think that they can make it work if they throw enough money at it. And so this is where, again, not necessarily conspiratorially, but I think what they think is, okay, well, if we just throw enough money at the problem, it'll solve itself. And we just want to make certain that it's our people who are in on it instead of someone else, since it's going to be an inevitability. I think they genuinely believe that. That's what this is about. This is about forcing a move to this quote unquote green economy. The problem is they know nothing about science or the economy. And so they've done with everything else, they throw money at it thinking that this will solve it. And they're like, well, as long as we still have oil and we're still doing all these things, then people won't have an initiative to go buy an electric car. And so they do these things. The same thing with houses. It's, well, let's just make it easy for everybody to own a house. And it's like, well, if you buy the house, then everything's fine. There is no actual thinking about second, third, or fourth ramifications. It's what's called the law of unintended consequences. And we've talked about this before, and I'm of the opinion, I no longer believe in, let me phrase this. I'm trying to think what the best way to say this. It's not that I don't believe in the law of unintended consequences. I absolutely do. My problem is, at this point, there's sufficient evidence to know how things would go or how things actually work that you can't possibly be stupid enough to not recognize what would happen. So I don't know that it's as unintended as possible as it could be. But I think the problem, what we fundamentally come down to, is the people running this administration, they think that you can just will something into existence. Donald Trump was, the people complained about his, his positive, the power of positive thinking that he had, that he used. But there's a difference between looking at the world and saying, I'm going to have a positive attitude about how I address these problems, versus magical thinking, which is what this administration is beginning to engage with, which is, well, if we just say we're going to do it and throw enough money at it, eventually it'll work. That's just not how the world works. And it's the same problem. Instead of dealing with reality the way it's shaped and then making the best decisions, it's about trying to create this whole new reality out of thin air, regardless of what the consequences are going to be.
Well, I think, excuse me. Firstly, I want to give a shout out to some of our fans streaming in, and we're so glad you're here. Hi to a Salty One and to JG Thomas, and all of our fans listening, both on the East Coast, West Coast, and those of us in the wacky middle of the country. Without jumping to some huge thematic platform, going to that 30,000 foot view instantly, what I would say is this. I think what happens in any type of presidential election is that the talking heads give you so much information. Whether it's accurate or not is a completely different conversation, but you're provided with so many topics that eventually,
spoiler, it's not.
Right. But I think you fall back upon this perspective of this feeling. If you're not a policy voter, if you're a person voter, you're going to step back and get into the position that you want to, the thing that I heard, I just want things to go back to normal. I just want to, and it was this pressure release valve. What's funny is that I think Biden tried to capitalize on that. I represent the establishment. I represent the Obama administration. I represent going back to this less chaotic time. And that's what I want to do. Unfortunately, even within his first 6 days, he hasn't governed, even like Obama did. And let me give you an example. If I recall correctly, Bill Clinton in his first week, used one executive order.
Yeah.
George W. Bush used 0.
Yeah.
Barack Obama used 5, I think.
Yeah, it was like 4 or 5. Yeah.
Donald Trump used 4. Joe Biden is at 32.
Yeah.
Now,
he was like 24 in the first week, in the first 6 days.
Well, he came in with the perspective, and again, this is not just bash the president hour. That's not what I'm trying to do. What I'm trying to do tonight for our listeners out there is I'm trying to think about this from the perspective of, if I were a diehard Biden voter, and not, I don't mean wrapped up in the, holding signs and growing beards. I mean, like, I'm your moderate Democrat in the suburbs, but was committed to voting for Biden because I felt it to be the right thing to do for my country. Because I wanted this return, as I understood it, to this normalcy in Washington. And in the first week, we've seen a secondary impeachment effort now going after a private American citizen which, whether you think Trump should be gone after or not, the channel of impeachment seems inappropriate as an instrument. And the vote that came out in the Senate showed that. I mean, this is going to go nowhere, and everybody knows it.
Well, in Roberts, I think that was a lot of people have some complaints, as do I, about John Roberts. But even he flat out said, I'm not going to chair this because it's not constitutional. Now, there are people on the right who would even argue that there may be some level of, you could argue that an impeachment of someone who has left office is possible. But when the Chief Justice is like, guys, come on, this is so nakedly political, I don't want anything to do with it. Like, that's exactly what he's saying. You kind of have to take that as a message.
Well, as I understand it, Chief Justice Roberts won't oversee it because the Supreme Court justice oversees it when it's the impeachment of a president. The president pro tempore, which they have there as Patrick Leahy, Senator Leahy, is there because it's not a sitting president. So that's why this argument is, look, I'm all for accountability. If somebody, I don't care who you are, if you broke the law, there should be an accountable channel to do that. That's not what I'm concerned with. What I'm concerned with is this is going to further destabilize and create partisanship, and that's all that this is. I thought Rand Paul, to go to the libertarian in the group, I thought Rand Paul's Senate address on this was fantastic. But I want to get back kind of to one previous conversation and say, if I am that Democrat voter in Sheboygan and I'm voting for Biden with this hope to this return to legitimacy and normalcy, some of our fans are writing in now, and I can see things from a salty one, and I like what they put it about, they want this, we have this nation needs the former return to what we said would be normal. But, and I'm going to pose the question out there, who addresses normal? What does normal mean in the first place? Secondarily, is gridlock the answer to returning to normalcy? The Republicans. In my opinion, I would be very disappointed to see if all the Republicans just started impeaching Biden just willy-nilly, just randomly, and you're going to get the one-off, two-off votes that are already there, people that have already filed paperwork. I get it. It's bread and circuses. We've said that 100 times. But I want to pick examples, and I wanted to think about this and present anecdotes to do it. Number one, the return to normalcy is that Biden has produced 500%. Excuse me, let me do basic math. 32 at 5. Okay, so he's done now 7 times more than the first president. 7 times more.
Did you have to use your toes in that one?
Yeah, no, I was like subtract 6, carry that over the I after E except before C. And I was thinking about it. And I was thinking, so there's no normalcy in the way that he's governed with regard to executive order. Okay. The concept of him stepping in as a statesman and saying the impeachment's not going to go anywhere. It's not necessary to the country. We need to let this country heal and move past it. And I know that he's getting advisors that say, sir, let people have their illusions. Let them think at least, hey, they're going to try to impeach him and hold him accountable. I get it. But the problem that I'm seeing is that, again, as we've talked about, you've canceled the Keystone Pipeline. So you're getting rid of jobs, which goes against your pledge to unions. You're putting up 32 executive orders. So you're not governing as this, it should be the governed of the willed. You're just governance by the willing. You're just throwing things out there. And then when you dig into what those things are doing, not only are many of them unpopular, but the state of Texas has already filed suit and a federal judge held it that he's already overreached. In 6 days, he's already constitutionally overreached in his executive power. And you have to ask, as we ask on the show every time, cui bono, who benefits? Why take these steps? Is this purely to assuage the perspectives of those on the far left? I think Biden is too much of a Washington elite that knows how that works, or he was at one time, to do that. I'm thinking again, if I am John Q voter in Sheboygan and I'm voting as a moderate and I see this, I've got to be saying to myself, whoa, what?
Okay, so let me preface this by saying, in my heart of hearts, I honestly have trouble believing this. However, my wife and I, we do disagree from time to time, but she's had this point that the vast majority of people right? They get their news from the mainstream media, from Yahoo, from Facebook. That's where their news comes from. It is an echo chamber, right? In fact, one of the things Tim Pool points out all the time, and there was a study done years ago where they point out that conservatives actually get, if you're a conservative, you get 3/4 of your media is conservative media, and 1/4, or maybe it was like 2/3 and 1/3 is liberal, right? If you're in the middle, it's almost 50-50. But if you vote Democrat, if you're on the left, it tends to be almost 100% mainstream media. And so for her, she keeps telling me, because she talks to a lot of people who are liberal, and it's just they get all of their news from this, and so they believe what the mainstream media is propping up in their propaganda. So I think for a lot of people, they genuinely thought, and they heard day after day, we need to return to normalcy. We need to return, da 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 da. Orange man bad, right? That's all they heard. That's all they were exposed to. They didn't hear about all the things that were going on. They didn't hear about the fact that, I'm sorry, if you voted for Biden and you didn't know he was going to do this, I don't know how to help you, because I'm like, it was obvious that he was going to. I know people say, but he said he wouldn't. Well, actually, if you look, he said he was going to do everything. He said he wouldn't do something and would do something else. So all you kind of had to do was say, well, who are the people pulling his strings? And then it's like, okay, well, now I know which way he's going to go. It's not hard. You don't have to be brilliant on this. But you ask, cui bono, who benefits? Well, let's talk about something that I think a lot of people just completely miss, and that's even those on the right. When Biden came out with Build Back Better, the initial response from everyone was, he's straight up plagiarizing Trump. And that was the assumption everyone had. What completely missed, though, he wasn't aping Trump. He was literally lifting the chant for what is called the Great Reset. For those who are unaware, the Great Reset is literally this plan by the World Economic Forum and others to, quote unquote, reset capitalism. That's what this is about. What we've gone through over the last year with COVID and everything is the greatest transfer of wealth from the middle class to the elites that has ever happened in the history of the planet.
I do want to jump in for just a second here, because it's very topical, and I was checking the news on this just a minute ago. It's official. Not only was it supposed to be already over $100 billion for the quarter, but Apple even blew away the higher estimates. It was supposed to be $103 billion. They posted $111 billion in the first quarter.
Holy cow.
So October to January. So I want to put into perspective what that means. Okay. The economy grew, believe it or not, from 2019 to 2020, the economy grew by 0.7%. Apple posted the largest quarter in the history of not only the company, but in it's called a super cycle because there's so many people that it just happened to hit in this exact time that all these people's iPhones and everyone was upgrading. And evidently everybody just loves the new iPhone. But what I'm getting at is, A, where's the money coming from to buy these expensive products? B, to your point, this transition of wealth. I mean, how many tens of thousands of small businesses have gone under? And yet Apple, Facebook, Google, all of them, all of their platforms are flourishing. It is. So to just simply provide a quantifiable measurement, I wanted to get that to you because earnings just came out today, a couple hours ago, and it was surreal. Now the market is already upside down. Who knows? It dropped 600 points. It does this. Who knows? I mean, it's bizarre. But the point that I'm getting at is that the most valuable company in the world, it took Apple 42 years to get a $1 trillion valuation. It took it 18 months to get to $2 trillion.
Yeah.
So, I mean, corporations are doing just fine.
Right. And they're designed to. See, that's sort of the big myth those on the right, conservatives, they're all about big business. No, they're not. Those who like big government love big business because with big business, you can control You can control a big business a lot easier than it is to control 1,000 little businesses, right? And that's really the way this works is the government, and we've known this since FDR, right? Because FDR did this very early on. The big businesses come to you, and you're the government. You're like, hey, I want you to do X, Y, Z. They say, okay, we'll do that, but this is what you got to do for us in return. As I drop my mic, is they create regulations that are designed to put lesser competition out of business before they have a chance to really hurt you. That's what this is. That's how this works. That's why you've got, Parler gets shut down. A lot of people are like, oh, it's about the what people were talking about on Parler. No, it wasn't. That's a fig leaf. That's the fig leaf for getting rid of competition for this conglomerate, right? We've got Amazon, we got Apple, we got Google. Those three companies, in one way or another, control the vast majority of information on the planet. They are in league with numerous governments around the planet. On planet Earth right now, there are corporations, and then there are governments, and they're intertwining themselves to control virtually everything. What can't be controlled through information is controlled through regulation. And this goes back to sort of my whole point. The whole Build Back Better mantra that Joe Biden stole is from this great reset. Well, once this reset is done, the middle class disappears. There's just going to be those in control of everything. That's it. That's all. That's what they want. That's not me saying it. That's not some conspiracy theorist in somebody's basement saying it. This is the World Economic Forum basically saying they want to restructure capitalism, quote unquote. And this is where you hear all this talk about, they want to have this eye towards equitability, right? Not equality, but they want to focus on natures of equity. That's what this is about. They're going to manipulate the markets in the laws in such a way that essentially is going to destroy the middle class.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think the concept, and I challenge our listeners out there to go and spend time on it so that they can have their own understandings and see where it's coming from between the differences of equality and equity, because they are very, very different terms, but they're being used interchangeably. But we've become very, very loose with language anyway, and very irresponsible. In one mode, we use language now that's so hyperbolic all the time that nothing has any type of what's the word I'm looking for? There's no impact to the language anymore because everything is just huge all the time. Everything is the worst thing ever. Everything is this. But what I do find interesting is that when we look at this from the perspective of gently dancing around speech codes and dancing around First Amendment rights and dancing around how you can, you want to change the argument, change the words you can use in the argument. You may have seen stories coming out. One of the executive orders that Biden was pushing was about restricting the use and showing that we were going to have avoidance and policies in place to avoid that there are any type of xenophobic references. Well, speaking about that, again, how far do you follow that down? And the one in particular he talked about is he said that he would not exhibit or contribute to racism, xenophobia, or and intolerance against Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Okay, well, very clearly what that's trying to say is that they don't want people to say things like the Chinese coronavirus. But what's interesting about that is that there are many other viruses in the world that have been identified for what they were. And their location played a historical perspective in documenting its origination. The Spanish flu, West Nile virus, Zika, Ebola. These are all places, locations to pick things up, right? Okay. MERS. I mean, you had different things that were coming about. So what you do is you change the rules of the language, and then you don't have to worry about it. This is exactly what happened with little kids when you would beat them in a game, and then they would just change the rules. But what's funny is, and this will show exactly what it is, Ari Fleischer, former press secretary, was talking about this, and he put out a comment, and he's like, so let me get this straight. I'm going to paraphrase. Let me get this straight. There's now law trying to be pushed that says using the term Chinese virus is looked upon as judgmental and critical. Okay, that's the problem. Here's the side, though, that's funny. They now have headlines where stories are coming out, being released openly to the public. I mean, listen to this. Moderna says its vaccine protects against British and South African coronavirus variants.
Yep.
So they don't want you to use the source of it being China, but they want you to use the name of the variations because those tend to be typically, or at one point were, obviously South Africa more so, but British and South African being predominantly of non. It's funny to say minority because there's more Chinese people and Indian people in this world than any other type of people, but it's just funny to see that perspective.
Well, it would be funny if it was honest, but I go back to,
and not just black, white, or from an anthropological perspective, but I mean, in terms of nationality, culture, obviously China and India have the biggest populations in the world. But what I'm getting at is you're just and I think you get what you tolerate. If someone just stands up, it's like the Red Scare. I've said it a lot. I've said it many times on the show. I feel like this is our generation's Red Scare, right? And that ended when somebody finally just stood up and said, stop it. Have decency. This has got to stop to an end. And this cannot be sustained. This environment cannot be sustained because there's so many rules that eventually the left will go after itself. It's detrimental to itself. You can't maintain the amount of morality. A friend of mine, a mutual friend that you know as well, who's a progressive liberal Democrat, I mean, on the left, very openly, has said that we're occupying a time filled with, how did he say it? Morality rules and purity tests that nobody can pass. And it's almost like the younger generation in some ways that embrace this so deeply, they're somehow mindful. Actually, I'd say more towards millennials. They're actually saying the younger generations are actually becoming more conservative because they're seeing some of this as an example of what not to do. But what I'm getting at is that
from your mouth to God's ears.
I hope. But what I'm saying is that you see this perspective, and I was speaking with a friend about it earlier today. When you're seeing universities that are endorsing, and this has gone on for years, this is nothing new. I'm going to interject this real quickly, but the concept where students are asking for like segregated dorms, they're voluntarily requesting segregated dorms, segregated graduation ceremonies. And I was reminded, as I said every single time, everyone knows what I'm going to say on this show. I can't imagine what Martin Luther King would think. Because we have, in effect, done the exact opposite of what he said. And instigators and supporters of Jim Crow must be just, high-fiving each other. Because we have come to a point where I feel so frustrated for those people who have wanted so long for their voice to count and for their skin color or their sexuality or their religious beliefs to not be an impedance to being able to participate and be validly seen by others as an equal because of their capabilities, because of their mentality and their mental acuity and their academia and their strengths of thought and character. And we have an administration that prides itself on saying, we are the epitome of diversity. No, you're not. All of you have the same thought process. All of you are, from one side of the spectrum to another, ambitious, progressive, I don't know if I'd say counter-capitalist, but the mentality present in the Biden White House tends to be one that I've noticed is this, and I'll go to the press side of it as well. From the press secretary side, it's almost one of an impatience towards being asked questions.
Yeah.
Like, why wasn't the president wearing a mask? Well, he's got bigger things he's celebrating. Okay, cool. Then I guess that's fine. And there's no follow-up. And that's what I was saying earlier in pre-production. It's not that the media has just taken off the gloves and now is sitting down and all having juice and cookies. It's like they've almost admitted that they're now invalid. They've almost said, we are no longer the resource to hold the government accountable through an investigative and curious free press.
Well, they did that under Trump. This is, for me, this is where this all sort of comes together. They are and have been the propaganda wing of not just the Democratic Party. It's easy to focus on them because I think it's so much easier, but of, I would argue, the deep state. And let me be very specific about what I mean by the deep state. For me, the deep state, and I think Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. I think you would agree with this. The deep state is essentially those who make their money off of the government, right? This elite viewpoint that has this desire for a large centralized government. There are those in the Republican Party who've asked for it. That's why McCain would often get good press so long as he did what was in the as long as he did the bidding of the deep state, everyone loved him, right? He was a maverick, and everything was great. So I'm not saying that they all have necessarily the same agenda per se in micro, but in the macro, a large centralized government that sort of controls all things and can make everything happen, and that's where the money is coming from. That they are bought and sold to that mentality, and this is one large group: the media, the government, now these large the big tech conglomerate. They're all one thing. This is the military industrial complex that we were warned about so many years ago. They're just the propaganda.
You're pulling out Eisenhower here. We're going back. Hey, bonus points. I'm going to send this out to our fans right now. Bonus points, Nick. You get 2 Nick bonus points if you can answer this. All right.
All right.
Anyone listening can tell us. You get 2 Nick bonus points if you can answer this. What was the original? President Eisenhower referred to the concerns he maintained with regard to the industrial military complex. Bonus points to anybody out there who can answer this. What was the original text that he wrote in his farewell address that he scratched out a word in that title? It wasn't just the military industrial complex. There was another word involved. We're going to give you guys 30 seconds, and then we're going to check back in. I'm going to head over to Alex on this. Alex, I didn't want to interrupt, but I appreciate that you said that. I want to see if anybody can pull this up. I want to see if our fans can you know that they're Googling like crazy right now.
Well, that's the thing is if they've been with us a while, they would have already heard me mention this in the past.
Yeah.
Because it's a really valuable point. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, and this goes back to our question, how, if you voted for Biden and you're a pipe fitter, right, who just lost his job, and you're like, but I thought he wouldn't do this. Well, congratulations. It's because you got took.
Well, look at Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania just spent its whole time talking about the validity and the accuracy in their elections. Okay, cool. So that makes it worse somehow, because now what you're saying is they voluntarily and willingly voted against their own personal interest when these massive channels, trust me, the administration just came out that they're gonna shut down fracking on federal lands, and mark your watches. How long until they make those pushes to go in other directions that are not on public lands? And he sent out an executive order with regard to closing down for-profit prisons. I don't care if it's a for-profit prison or a for-profit anything. It's a business, and the government just said, nope, we're taking this.
Yeah. And again, it's like, and that's even sort of a misnomer. It's like, well, they're for-profit prisons. Well, the prison itself's for profit, yes, but it's the government that's paying them. There's still an act. It's still an act of the government that's putting people in there. And it's like, so the problem goes back to, it's still governmental to begin with. And here's my question to all the Christians out there who decided that, yeah, I'll vote for him because he's a nice man. Well, at what point do the church's taxable status change if they don't do gay weddings?
Well, we can hit that alignment here in a minute. I do want to kick it back to our audience. I see that a salty one here came up with our question. What was the word or the original text of that phrase that was taken out? And it looks like a salty one here. I want to thank them for tuning in. They put permanent armaments industry of vast proportions. That's way too smart for me. I wasn't going down that path, but I thank a salty one on that, because now my IQ just was raised 4.5 points.
Maybe even 6.
He's
not wrong.
No. If that's the proper wording on it, I'm sure the name of the act or the name of it. What we're getting at here, Alex. Do you want to explain what we were talking about?
Yes. In the last version of that famous speech, when he talks about the military-industrial complex, he originally named the military-industrial complex the military congressional industrial complex. He had included the word congressional in there, and basically he was finally allowed, or he was forced to remove it. And the reason for it is because for the reason that one word is so important, I think, for us is we have to remember we've got representatives, we've got senators. They're going in there. They're the ones who are manipulating everything. They're the ones who are passing the laws. They're the ones who get to decide which bases go where, and they are lining their pockets. It's when you see how much people go in, they were worth originally and what they're worth now, it makes you sick, and it should make everyone sick. They are making money off of us. That's our money that they're using, that they're borrowing, that they are exploiting. They make rules, and they don't. It ultimately doesn't apply to them. Again, I go back to what made me so upset with this, with the quote unquote security that they felt like they needed that's now going until March. That is insane. But when it was your city that was getting burned down, when it was your it was the federal buildings in your town that were getting bombed and were being burned down, and your police officers getting murdered, and your average person getting murdered. When it was the police building in your town that was being welded shut, and Antifa was trying to burn it down with the cops inside. When it's the apartment complexes with children that Black Lives Matter and Antifa rioters are trying to burn down in Kenosha, there was no one to be seen.
Well, we've talked about it before on our show, that the concept, and again, wanting to keep that perspective that, we wanted this platform from the beginning to be somewhere for us to, I think, vent a little and maybe to engage a little, because we had just started lockdowns, or we were close to it. But I think what we've always wanted to do is to provide those bigger questions and ask those reasons as to why things are being driven this way. And as I'm getting older, the thoughts are just fleeing from my brain. So I'm going to try to formulate together a question quickly enough and make it sound like I thought about it. There are driving forces that are pushing a lot of these things. Yes, I think the media is amplifying them. Yes, I think that there are good people in the mixes. There are just as many people that I think can look to what happened at the Capitol and say 99.999% of the people that were there. I mean, numbers were supposedly approaching 100,000. And of that, several hundred went in, which would be, far too many. But what I'm getting at is that, you're looking at an overwhelming majority of people that have nothing to do with that. I want to believe, whether you agree with or disagree with the philosophies and the what we believe statements behind these organizations like Black Lives Matter, that not every one of those riots was just overwhelmingly something driven by that. Now, those riots led to tremendous damage, tremendous loss, and I don't think it helped engagement in the debate. I don't think that it drew people in to wanting to have more. I think it created more fear. I think it created more division. And from what I've seen, I don't know, and someone else, fact check me on this. I'm conceding that I cannot verify it in this exact moment, but I did see literature coming out saying that to this moment, the Biden administration has still not met with BLM leaders.
It hasn't.
And so again, I go back to that voter in Sheboygan who said, okay, you're going to breed these racial things. You're seeing the West Coast light up. I mean, you've got a recall going on for Gavin Newsom. You've got Portland on fire again, and people are burning down everything. And they're going after the Democrat offices. But the way that you shield it is by just not covering it in the media. So you're that voter in Sheboygan, and you're going, I wanted there to be racial calmness. I wanted there to be, policies that were going to help everybody here. I mean, you're watching these anti-business policies, and when it trickles down and jobs go away, I don't think things get better unless your goal is to unless this virus was a way of guaranteeing this experiment to put people on universal basic income. I just don't see where this goes. I'm not trying to be that guy. I don't want the show to become that show. that we just bashed Joe Biden. I don't want to do that. The man is president of the United States, and I will respect the office. But I'm struggling to anecdotally find an example where I can say, okay, I understand why this choice was made. I don't care if you're a conservative, a libertarian, a Democrat, an independent. I don't care. I can't find outside of the very progressive left, I can't find anything in these executive orders that can be cross-pollinated and bring about any unity. And I can't.
Well,
Now, I'm not saying that I'm a political scholar, but there's got to be something. And if I'm that voter in Sheboygan, the question is, have I learned my lesson, and will I do it again in 4 years?
Well, that is the question in hand, and I'm too cynical to say that they have or that anyone has. Prove me wrong, people. Prove me wrong. But so you go back to you're having trouble finding it. I would argue the reason you can't find it because it's not there. This is the whole unity. We want everyone to hold hands and sing along. We want to grow the economy. We want to fix everything. That's all. These are all fig leaves. None of it's real. I don't think he cares at all. I don't think you can make the claim that he cares at all. I don't think there's any evidence that you could even begin to make the claim that he cares at all. What you can say, though, is that this is about control and power. And the problem is we have a news industry that's no longer the news industry. It is simply the propaganda wing of this larger cabal of interest, right? And it's not. And here's the thing: everyone thinks, "Oh, this is conspiracy theory." No, it's not conspiracy theory if they're saying it publicly. The problem is they just don't tell you they're saying it publicly. If you're living and dying by the mainstream media, then you're not going to hear these things. They're not going to, most people don't have time to sit down and break down. It's like, hey, why is it, that I'm not hearing this, and this story? Because I heard it over here, but I'm not hearing it from these people. Why is that the case? So it goes back to, if you're the pipe fitter in Sheboygan, I don't know why we're picking on Sheboygan tonight, but I guess it's their turn. If you're a pipe fitter in Sheboygan right now, and you're like, well, what the heck is going on? I don't know that this necessarily. I don't know that they wake up from this because they're just hearing how wonderful this meat puppet is that's in the that's sitting in the Oval Office, thinking that he's in a Denny's. I mean, all they're hearing are people flagellating themselves. Not flagellating. That's the wrong word. And, so here's the problem. I'm really trying to
hold on. Hold for editing.
Yeah.
And action. Go ahead.
So yeah, I'm really trying not to work blue here because the one word I really want to use is inappropriate. But yeah.
Let me jump. I'll jump in here. I'll jump in.
Go for it.
Let me say it like this. So the concern that I think a lot of people might be thinking or struggling with, and I will take ownership of this for myself. I won't discuss personal voting records, but I will say when I've been in situations that I discuss this, the thing I guess I'm most concerned about is when you see what's been going on with the government. Here's what I believe. Number one, I think Joe Biden, I won't refer to him as a meat puppet. I do believe, first off, out of respect for the 90s band, but secondly,
that's a good point. I forgot about that.
Out of respect for the office, and that's not me calling you out. I'm just saying I'm trying to make that my baseline, right? I'm going to keep that there. I didn't refer to President Obama, President Trump, or President Biden that way, and that's just for personal reasons. But the point that I'm getting at is this: when we're seeing what we're seeing here. And I think that Joe Biden is someone who's going to wait to see how he comes out on everything. He's going to poll it. He's going to do it. I don't think Joe Biden is a leader. I don't think Joe Biden is a manager. I don't think that Joe Biden is someone who understands how to run something. I think Joe Biden knows how to be a voice because he's a recognizable face. That's it. I'm going to leave that there where it is. I think there are people behind him that are pulling a lot of the strings. I think Susan Rice is integrally involved. Now, though I think Susan Rice is an incredibly intelligent woman, I disagree very wholeheartedly. I think she's I have concerns about some of her decisions and choices with regards to transparency and integrity with regard to certain issues that have been made very public, in fact. But the point that I'm getting at is that
was remarkably democratic or diplomatic. Let me rephrase it.
I want to just simply say that when you go down that laundry list, right? Biden used to think that court packing was a boneheaded, his word, boneheaded, come on, man, a boneheaded perspective. Well, wait, see what that happens. It'll change. Well, about the border. I mean, creating, for those of us living in Texas, okay, we're not going to spend another dollar to increase the wall another foot. Great. All the people are still coming though, right? And now we're talking about global pandemics and what are we doing to ensure the safety and security of the United States? But just from a human perspective, with policies based on wanting to consider humanity, consider drawing upon our faith to love all people, what are we doing about young women, children, men, whoever, that are coming from these places and now they're all corralling together? We're not thinking about this. I think the problem that I'm getting at is that whether you were voting, to that voter in Sheboygan, I'm going to lay it out right now, whether you were a voter in Sheboygan who wanted to defend the union and thought you were going to get the union some rights and your workers and all right, we got a Democrat in and Democrats love unions and this is going to be great. You just got shot in the face. Okay. Whether you were someone who was about wanting energy independence for America, you just cut the pipeline off. China, Saudi Arabia, and Russia are really psyched right now. Okay. Whether you were someone that wanted to see a return to normalcy in government, you just had someone issue 7 times as many executive actions as his predecessor, if not 8 times. The concern that I have is that at no level are we seeing you're letting a runaway sham impeachment take place, not because there wasn't something that could be done or laws or that I want the rule of law to supersede all things. I do. But the channel they're using is completely the inappropriate channel. I mean, it's the wrong functioning device to use. It's the wrong instrument. So I can't find a channel, Alex. And that's why I don't want it to just be, well, Joe Biden's got the IQ of a pork chop. Like none of those conversations are going to move the needle on anyone. For me, I'm thinking,
it's not.
What are we doing for that voter who's sitting back there? Because here's the concern that I have, and I'm going to end on this. When I look at someone and their response is, well, it's better than Trump, or I just wanted to go back to normal, but you didn't even know what that was going to be. And now you got all these horrible things that you regret. The concern that I have is, how seriously do you take their capacity to consider who they vote for or what their decision-making, and the problem that hits me with is that I want to look at the people in my life as those that make me better, that I admire, and people that drive me. And I don't want us to be farther separated from one another. COVID has done enough of that. And that's that part where I'm finding myself, and for my friends out there who know me, believe me, you know the political talks we've had over the last 5 years. Believe me. I know that question has been, I could give Nick a call. Hold on, do I have 2 hours? All right, I'll give Nick a call. And now it's to the point where when I realize it's kind of going down that path, I'm just like, nope, I'm good. Let's get a hot dog. Because I don't want it to interfere with that friendship. And I don't want my beliefs to do that, because it's just, like I said, I cannot find something that says, you know what? I get it. I get why they did this. I get what this represents, because I'm not there right now. I'm not.
Well, so here's the thing. I don't disagree. I don't know. Right? I mean, I don't know that pipe fitter in Sheboygan is going to necessarily make that connection. That's like, hey, hold on, I voted for this guy, and he just screwed me out of a job. And look at all these rules and regulations he's passing. I don't know that they learn from this. I honestly don't. And it's not because I have a problem with pipe fitters in Sheboygan, per se, although they know what they did. It's more of I don't know that the stranglehold that the media has on people is something that can be overcome anymore. I don't know that people losing their job is, I don't know that that's sufficient to have people realize they made a mistake, or that the policy isn't what they were sold. I don't know that that's what's that the media will even allow them to make those connections. I think they're just going to be told, well, this is probably something to do with Trump anyway. Or there is some other way that they'll just wipe this problem, from their minds, and then 2 years they'll vote for more Democrats, and then they'll move on. We got to find a way for those of us on the right, and this is probably the next best question, is it can't just be we got to find a new place to, to send our Twitters and our tweets and Facebooks and stuff like that. We can't just find another way. We got to find a way to actually change the conversation in the broader media, where it's not just, a few million people, watching Fox or One American News or Newsmax. Because don't get me wrong, as big as those channels are becoming and are, they pale in comparison to the broader conversation that's being had on traditional terrestrial stations. We got to find a way to make this conversation more universal, where more people are hearing this conversation. And that's got to be the better way to fight this, with good information that people can trust. And unfortunately, it seems like we've entered an era where we are just simply choosing what to believe. There's no objective reality anymore. So that's where I'm worried the most, that people are just going to choose to believe the propaganda wing, and that's currently the majority media.
Well, as we round the bend here and come to the final landing approach, I don't want to surrender the desire to want to grow closer to my fellow countrymen, the desire to want to have more civil dialogue. Doesn't mean we can't still disagree vehemently, but I think we can do it in a respectful way. And I'm never going to surrender the hope of wanting that to happen. I want to see how these challenges can be overcome. And the only thing I can think about that with, going back to your comment about Parler earlier, is, as crazy as this sounds, do you create an entire segregated internet? I mean, do you create Gab, for example, has its own platform that it can go off of and operate, so that it doesn't have to be bound to any of those big three, right? So right. Is that what we do now? Is that, Rupert Murdoch, he demonstrated, when everybody else is making blue suits, make a brown suit, you'll make a killing, right? You don't have to reinvent the wheel, just make one that's a different color. And I think we're in a position that, do you create that and then really accentuate the concepts of how many, echo chambers there are? The reason that Twitter has any impact at all is because there's so many people in a concentrated area. But if 30%, 40% of those people left, that could be impactful, and reduce its exposure. You know what I mean? Again, if you're a barbecue restaurant and you're in Sheboygan, come to Sheboygan. If you're in Sheboygan, you probably got a little bit more traction, a little bit less competition. I don't want to speak about the barbecue, restaurant industry in Sheboygan, but I'm willing to bet, compared to some place like Kansas City or maybe Austin, Texas, you're probably going to be a little more rare in Sheboygan. So I'm hoping that we get into a place. I really hope we don't hear from the Chamber of Commerce of Sheboygan. But
Sheboygan, if you'd like to support us, we are talking about you an awful lot.
Yeah, exactly.
We'd love, for a good couple of grand an episode, we'd love to hear about your barbecue joints.
Absolutely. No, I really would love to be in a place that, again, do we create these other platforms? I don't want to further segregate that, but again, those weren't the terms that people were trying to agree upon and asked for, but that's what seems to be happening. So, people have been saying, well, what do we do? What do we do? The answer in the short run is you have to become independent. You have to create your own in the same way that independent, alternative media is getting out there. You don't want to listen to Fox News. You don't want to listen to CNN. Okay, so go out and listen to, Steven Crowder, Ben Shapiro, whatever. Pod Save America, whatever your thing is. But I don't know. There's got to be a way that eventually, and I think we will. And it may be the unification that most people wake up and see that these policies, when people say, well, I'm not a policy voter. Well, you might become one.
Yeah, you may want to rethink that particular position. So I guess the homework we're going to have for our lovely listeners today, right, is actually, hold on. I just saw a salty one's comment. That maybe, so let me read this, because I think this is it ties into where we want to end. It says, you may be hard pressed to find independent thinkers, those who don't put stock in mainstream media, that will put any faith in any form of media, because how long will it really take to corrupt the new? So that's a great point. And I think this is sort of the bigger issue. We're not teaching people to think. And truth be told, like you said, we don't want to be. I'll probably stop calling Biden a meat puppet at some point in the future, but today's not that day. But my broader point is, and the reason I use that term is because we know he's not really the one governing. He is a stand-in. But the problem is, even is that as much as we like to sit here and say, we're thinking about this, we want to have a conversation. I know that if you were to put everyone who agrees with me in a room, a very, very large room, the vast majority of people in that room are not going to have thought necessarily about why they agree with me. They just do. It's an instinctive thing. The thought leaders that they listen to have sort of given a position, and they're following that blindly. It's instinctively. And that's true on both sides. The problem is the vast majority of people don't really think through the issues, which is why I'm not necessarily as enthusiastic about the idea that maybe that poor pipe fitter is going to be like, hey, okay, I got screwed over by this guy. I need to try the other side next time. I just don't think he thinks that way, because I think a lot of people don't think that way. It's just not human nature. There's a reason the Bible refers to humanity as sheep so very often. Well, we got to find a way, and this is sort of the homework I'm going to leave our listeners today, and this can be mentioned on next episode. How do we bring a better, broader conversation to the world, and how do we create what we need are actual intellectuals? We don't have intellectuals anymore. We used to have them, but we don't. How do we need people with credibility who can go out and have big conversations with people, who can argue for the right things, and sort of help people to see when we're being had. How do we do that? What does it take to bring that back? What are the elements that we need? And does this require, like you said, an entirely new, system of, sort of internet system, or does it require going maybe a step backwards? How do we regain that people whom the majority of our country can listen to and trust, to not maybe know that he's always right, but at least know that he genuinely means what he says, and have multiple people who can hash out arguments in the public fields so that people understand what's happening? How do we do that? Because if you do, we would love. I know Nick and I would love to execute that and make the $2.3 billion off of that idea.
Right.
Nick, sign us out.
Well, yeah, as always, look, what's most important about this is the reason we wanted to come together is to have a collective place to share ideas and thoughts, and whether part venting, part discussion, part humor, and part sales and leisure for the fine people of Sheboygan. To all of our friends out there, to all of our fans and all of our supporters out there, thank you for the encouragement. Thank you for sticking around. We want to welcome you to our new night. We thought we would try to find a way to make it a little more easy for your schedules out there, especially for our loved ones, friends and family and supporters out there on the East Coast. Thank you all so much for what you do. Stay safe. And as always, remember that as much as there is in the world that separates and divides us, there will always be that one more thing that unites us. So stay positive, love yourself and someone else. And to my teammate here, Alex, all the best, my friend. Be safe. God bless. And everybody have a great night.
Good night, everybody.